All right. So welcome in AP students. So what I'm going to do is give you a quick walkthrough on the changes to your AP exam based on the COVID-19 crisis. And I'm going to show you the rubric in which you will be assessed on your exam. So let's get to it. So the decision made by the College Board is quite simple. Instead of doing the 3.5-hour mega test that normally would be an AP history exam, it has been reduced to a 45-minute open note, open book, whatever you want to call it, test that is going to focus or consist of one question, and that question will be a document-based question essay, a DBQ. Now, they've changed the format of the said DBQ in order to guarantee that students can comfortably engage with the material and write an essay in the 45 minutes allotted. Now, I'm also going to hedge a little bit of a bet right now. I'm guessing that your DBQ is going to be broad. And what I mean by that is instead of being something very specific like the views and attitudes about French nobles during the French Revolution, it's probably going to be something wider like attitudes regarding the poor or views of education or to what extent were women incorporated in social and political life. Something that's going to be more nebulous and allow you to connect it to all of the different periods or times covered in the course. Right? And I have some evidence to prove that point, and I'll show it to you as we get into this. The other thing I really want to say as we get into it, I think this plays in our advantage. Essay writing is usually a thing that we do very well, especially for my Euro kids listening. We've written a bunch of essays so far this year. World, not so many, but we've done a lot of thinking skills, and we've set ourselves up for this. And so I think as far as an equalizing, factor is concerned, this actually puts us at a level pegging, if not above where we wanted to be. So this is fine for us. All right, now let's dig into the rubric. So the parts of the rubric have stayed the same, but they've adjusted the values. So instead of a 7-point rubric like they traditionally have with 7 documents, it is now a 10-point rubric, and only 5 documents will be provided on the exam. Okay, so let's break it down. These first 2 points are unchanged from the normal DBQ rubric. All right, so if we look at it, contextualization is worth 1 point, and it always has been worth 1 point. And they said that, if you focus heavily in your intro and you just revisit that somewhere in the essay, that will be enough to earn that 1 point. And so you're trying to describe the broader historical context relevant to the prompt. So if the prompt is asking you about, treatment of industrial workers, well, if we look broader at the whole time period, labor in general wasn't being treated very good. And my proof would be indentured servants, slaves, debt peonage, encomienda systems, the putting out system, limited voting, right? So all those would give the context that like common people and laborers didn't really matter to most people. Anyway, that's one of your 10 points. A thesis is always 1 point. That's always been part of it. And remember, it responds in a defensible claim that establishes, and this is the key, a line of reasoning. So if we're looking at to what extent were laborers, respected in society, you have to make sure that you're really answering the prompt given. So to a full extent, to no extent, and then you also have to give this line of reasoning. And that's where you don't just say because of social and political treatment. Social and political treatment doesn't mean anything. You have to say because of their lack of voting rights or because of their inability to access basic rights and freedoms. Things that would help actually stand alone or would help you answer the question. That's your analysis or your line of reasoning. Now, the next part of the rubric is one that has always existed, right? We've always had evidence from the documents, and usually this area of the rubric consists of 3 points. Now it consists of 5 points. So here's how they break it down. You will earn 1 point for incorporating the content of 2 of the 5 documents. You earn a second point if you don't just include the content, but you use that content in order to embolden or bolster an argument. So that would mean actually using that information, not just saying the doc said blank, but incorporating that information into your argument and then analyzing that information to match it up to your argument. Remember, it is not a book report. If you look at a book report, will get you 1 point. An argument or an essay, right? That's how you get these other 2 points. So that's how you get that one. And then that possible 5th point so far is you're supporting your argument, but now you're using 4 or 5 of the provided 5 documents. So instead of having 7 documents and having to use 6 or 7, you have 5 documents and you have to use 4 or 5 to get that point. Now, I think all of these so far are easy to accomplish. These are points that you should be able to confidently get. I would plan on getting these points. Maybe contextualization, if you're not a strong writer, would be the toughest one. But you should be crafting a thesis. You should be able to make groups or topics that incorporate 4 or 5 documents. And you should be using T and really incorporating your info into a structured argument and analyzing your point. And so right now, I would say for most of you, you should be aiming at 4 or 5 or all 5 of those 5 points currently. Now, here's where it starts to get a little bit different. Outside info has always been a 1-point evidence-based point, and it still is going to get you 1 point to bring in outside evidence, but you can do it 2 times, and if you do it a second time, it's a second additional point. And so when they say uses at least 1 additional piece of specific historical evidence beyond what is found in the documents, and it must be relevant to your argument of the prompt. Okay, and so what I mean by that is if it's looking at the treatment of labor and none of the documents talked about the Luddites, you could talk about the Luddites and how they thought that they were being replaced and disrespected by machinery, and so their plan was to go in with hammers and smash the hell out of factories. If that shows their view of their treatment and you connect it in and it's not in the documents, that could be a point. Another piece of evidence could then revolve or stem from like the Peterloo massacres or the protests at St. Peter's Field in Manchester. It could look at socialism or what was written in the Communist Manifesto and how they viewed labor as being abused by the current capitalist society. Right? If you do enough specific depth and you tie it back to the prompt, there's your 2 outside pieces of evidence. Now, I will be honest, for I think most people, this would be probably the hardest of the fair and obtainable bonus points or extra points here. All right, so we were at 5, now we're at 6 and 7. I certainly think that you have enough time with 45 minutes and only 5 docs to do this, but it's really going to require you to be quite deliberate. When you read that prompt and you see what the prompt is, in your mind, you should have like a quick, 30-second brainstorm that's going on. And when you hear labor, you're just thinking like, what is everything I know about work? I know about slavery. I know about debt peonage. I know about factories. I know about blah, blah. And as you read the documents, if you don't see one of those things, you're adding it. And you're going to look at your topics and go, it's going to fit here. It's going to fit there, right? And you're going to try to incorporate those things wherever you can to get those points. Now, these next points are ones that I think are actually really quite easy to get. And this is where we're doing source analysis. Now, normally I would tell you that you need to do at least 3 accurate examples of source analysis to get 1 point. And now they're saying that 1 accurate example of sourcing is 1 point. And if you do a second example, it's a second point. So here's an opportunity to gain more points for less work. Now remember, for source analysis, you must do more than say, however, he could be biased. That is way too basic. Notice the wording here. For one document, explain how or why the document's point of view purpose, historical situation, and or audience as relevant to the argument. So if I'm talking about the treatment of workers, and it comes from the point of view of a former slave, that's going to influence what they say. Having worked for no pay or having been abused for labor, would that change what they say about labor and its treatment? Of course. What would their purpose be? Maybe to inform government in some sort of courtroom. Maybe their purpose is to try to argue for better wages, right? Is it a speech? Is it meant for a newspaper? Who's the audience? Right? You have to go further than saying it's a bias, but if you can be very clear that one of these things influences the argument this way, that's now a point, 1-to-1. And you can do it a second time to get a second point. And so now we're at 9 of the 10 total points. And guys, I got to be honest, I think honestly all 9 of those points are fair. And I think there are many of you that could potentially be aiming for 9 out of 10 possible points right there. Again, if you're looking for areas where maybe you'd scrap points, if you're not real confident in the topic or the prompt and you don't love it, I would dump outside info, maybe even context, right? But still, that would put you at 6 out of 9 points. Or if you could do context or 1 outside evidence, you're at 7 of 9 points. I mean, I think that's fair, and I think it's really doable. Now, this last point is the 10th point, and that's that complexity of understanding. And I copied something that I heard on the College Board website, and as they were going over this live stream, a guy in the chat room called this the unicorn point. And I thought that was right on. Because I don't even know if I would worry about this point. Out of 10 possible points, I think it's okay to say I'm not even going to worry about it. To me, honest, I think that this point is more dangerous than it's helpful. Basically, what it's saying is that you would be changing the focus of the prompt to add or qualify the prompt. So you're not taking away from views of labor, but you're going to look at views of labor, looking for similarities and differences between men and women. Or you're going to be looking at treatment of labor and making a comparison between Eastern and Western thought. Or you're going to be looking at comparison of labor and also looking for a change over time and hopefully documenting that in, this century it was this, and then by this century, and this century, and this century, and explaining why we see that change over time. That's a lot of extra work, and I think it's dangerous work that could distract you from the actual task at hand. So my advice would be aim for a 90%. Aim for a 9 out of 10 and go into it knowing, right? Thesis and context, like always. I'm going to use 4 or 5 of my documents, like always. And now just know that you can get 2 points for outside info, and you can earn 2 points for just 2 analysis statements of sourcing. All right, so there we go. There are your 10 points on the new rubric, and we're going to spend a lot of time trying to isolate and work on these skills and practice our writing. All right, guys, so that's it for today, looking at the new format and the new rubric. I hope that makes sense, and as always, feel free to hit me up if you have any questions, but gotta be honest, I'm loving the flavor. All right, guys, take care.